You know, when you hear the word metaphysics, your mind probably jumps to things like crystal shops, auras, cosmic energy. But what if I told you the real meaning is actually way more fundamental and honestly a lot weirder? Today, we're going to go on a quest to figure out what that is, to understand the true nature of reality itself.
So let's just ask it straight up. What is metaphysics? I mean, the word itself sounds so complex, maybe even a little mysterious, right? It feels like it should be about things that are totally beyond our understanding. And, well, in a way, it is, but probably not in the way that you're thinking. It's not about the supernatural, it's about the supernatural, the basic underlying structure of existence.
Okay, so this slide just lays it all out perfectly. It separates the popular myth from the philosophical reality. On the one hand, yeah, you've got the common idea, spirituality, unseen energies, that kind of thing. But on the other side, that's what metaphysics actually is. It's the serious, rigorous study of the biggest questions you could possibly ask. Like, what does it even mean for something to exist? Is time a real thing? Do we actually have free will? These are the real puzzles metaphysicians are trying to solve.
So, how in the world did we get from these massive questions about existence and time to a word that sounds like it means beyond physics? Well, the story behind it is actually surprisingly down to earth. It's got nothing to do with transcending the physical world, and, believe it or not, everything to do with organizing a library.
No, seriously, that's it. About 100 years after Aristotle died, this editor, Andronicus of Rhodes, was trying to catalog his huge collection of writings. So he sorts through all the books on physics, which for Aristotle was basically the study of the natural world, how things change. And after that pile, he had this other set of 14 books on way more abstract topics. He didn't really have a name for them, so he just labeled them ta metaphysica. It literally just means the ones that come after the physics books. And somehow, the name just stuck.
Aristotle himself actually called this subject first philosophy. His goal was to study being qua being, or put more simply, being as being. So think of it like this. A biologist studies living beings. A physicist studies physical beings, but a metaphysician, they study what it means for anything to be in the first place. It's about the most fundamental properties of existence itself, long before you start asking if that thing is, a frog or a planet. And that brings us right to the core of this whole thing. If metaphysics is about existence, then it's really a quest to figure out what is fundamentally real versus what just appears to be real. And trust me, that line between the two is not always as clear as you might think. I love this quote from the philosopher Peter van Inwagen because it just nails the modern view. Metaphysics is all about trying to peel back the curtain of our everyday experience and see the world as it truly is. It's kind of like how the sun appears to move across the sky, but in reality, we know the Earth is spinning. Metaphysics just takes that same critical thinking and applies it to, well, everything.
But okay, I get it. Appearance versus reality can still feel a little abstract. So let's make it super concrete with a classic philosophical puzzle that gets right to the heart of the matter, and it all starts with something you see every single day.
Just think about that for a second. We all know what red is. We see red things all the time. But does redness, the quality of being red, exist as its own thing, separate from all the red objects in the world? Or is red just a word, just a label we use to group similar-looking things together? It sounds like such a simple question, but your answer has huge implications for what you believe is actually real.
And this, right here, is a debate that's been raging for centuries. Realism versus nominalism. The realist says, yes, redness is a real thing, a universal property, and every single red object participates in it. But the nominalist says, no way. There are only individual red things. Redness is just a name, a nomen, that we made up for convenience. There's no extra redness thing floating around out there in the universe.
And believe me, this isn't just a game of semantics. Philosophers like W.V.O. Quine argue that the way we talk carries something called ontological commitment. Now that's a really fancy way of saying that if our best scientific theories need us to talk about things like humanity or gravity or species, then we are basically committed to believing those things actually exist. Our language itself might be giving us clues about what's real.
So, this whole question of what's real was really just the beginning. From that starting point, the field of metaphysics just grew and grew, and it kind of became this catch-all for all of philosophy's deepest, most challenging, and most mind-bending puzzles.
As other areas of thinking branched off and became their own sciences, the questions that you couldn't answer with an experiment, questions about possibility, about cause and effect, about the mind and the body, and yeah, even about whether your chair really exists,
All of those fell under the giant umbrella of metaphysics.
All right, let's try a modern puzzle. Just take a second and look around the room you're in. Go ahead. How many objects do you see? It seems like such a simple question, right? You can count the chair, the desk, the lamp. But what if I told you the correct answer might be 0?
This brings us to a really startling claim from metaphysicians like, you guessed it, Peter van Inwagen again. He argues that composite objects, things like tables and chairs, don't really exist. What exist are the fundamental particles. There isn't actually a chair. There are just, as the quote says, elementary particles arranged chairwise. For him, the only composite objects that are truly real are living things. I mean, that is a wild conclusion that forces you to question your most basic assumptions about the world around you. Now, when you're faced with claims like that, you might start to wonder if metaphysics has kind of gone off the rails. And you know what? You would not be the first person to think that. In the 20th century, a really powerful philosophical movement popped up to argue that this entire field wasn't just wrong, it was fundamentally impossible.
They were called the logical positivists, and their argument was beautifully simple and powerful. They said that for any statement to be meaningful, you have to be able to test it through observation or an experiment. And since you can't exactly design an experiment to prove whether redness is real or if chairs exist, they just concluded that all metaphysical statements are, literally, meaningless nonsense.
But hold on a second. Let's use their own rule against them. What about that claim? Can you test it? Can you run a scientific experiment to prove that only testable statements are meaningful? The answer is no, you can't.
And boom, that is the fatal flaw. It's a problem called self-referential incoherence. The very argument that was designed to completely destroy metaphysics is itself a metaphysical statement about the nature of meaning, and it's one that fails its own test. If the positivists' main claim is true, then their own claim is meaningless. The whole attack just collapses under its own weight.
And that's exactly why metaphysics endures. It's not about finding some final, scientifically proven answer to everything. It's about looking at the very foundations of how we think. Every single field, including science, is built on top of metaphysical assumptions. Assumptions like the external world is real, or cause and effect actually works. Metaphysics is the discipline that drags those hidden assumptions out into the light and actually questions them. And so, metaphysics leaves us with these huge, fascinating, and sometimes frustrating questions that force us to think more deeply about what reality even is. So I'll just leave you with this one. If a philosopher like Van Inwagen is right, and a chair is just a collection of particles arranged in a certain way, what exactly are you sitting on?